The Galactic Council was a place where species from all corners of the universe came to make decisions that shaped the fate of entire star systems. For centuries, the Council had been made up of the most respected and powerful species in the galaxy: the Shalran, tall and wise beings with telepathic abilities; the Shiv, a race of ancient engineers with unmatched technology; and the Praal, reptilian beings who were known for their military strength. Humanity, however, was a newcomer. Earth had only recently joined the Council, and many members of the Council saw humanity as a curiosity rather than a true equal. They were young, brash, and often impulsive, qualities that the older, more experienced species looked down upon. At the heart of the Council's grand chamber, the meeting was about to begin. The room was filled with representatives from all the major species. The Shalran were seated at one end, their tall figures looming over the others. The Shiv sat at a long metallic table, their glowing eyes scanning the room with curiosity. The Praal, on the other hand, sat in a cluster, their yellow-scaled bodies radiating authority. The rest of the seats were occupied by various smaller races, all looking to the central podium where the Council President stood. But today, all eyes were on the new human representative, Captain Alara Reeves. She was standing at the entrance, her uniform crisp, her posture straight and proud. At just 35 years old, she was considered young by human standards, but in the context of the Galactic Council, she was a mere child. Many of the Council members scoffed at the idea of her representing Earth, thinking she was simply a soldier with no experience in diplomacy. Her reputation as a warrior and strategist was known, but few believed that could translate into effective politics. As Alara stepped forward, the quiet murmur in the room died down. She stood confidently, looking around the council chamber. Her dark brown eyes were steady and focused, betraying no hint of nervousness. She had faced much more dangerous situations than this in her life, facing down alien fleets, surviving countless battles. But this was different. This was politics. And in politics, she had to win the hearts and minds of the galaxy's most powerful beings. "Representative Reeves, welcome," said the president of the council, a Shalran named Keleth. His voice was soft but carried the weight of centuries of wisdom. "We are pleased to have you join us today. Please, take your seat." Alara nodded politely but did not smile. She had no intention of making small talk. Instead, she moved to her seat at the far end of the table, where she would be visible to all. The murmurs among the council members continued, some curious, others dismissive. The meeting began with discussions about various matters concerning the galaxy. Trade agreements were being negotiated, resources were being allocated, and a large part of the conversation revolved around a new alliance with the Torcan Empire, a race of aggressive, militaristic beings with an expanding empire. The Torcans were feared across the galaxy, and many of the council members were eager to form an alliance with them, seeing it as a way to strengthen their collective power. As the debate grew louder and more heated, Alara remained silent. She wasn't here to argue over trade routes or resources. She was here to show the council something they didn't yet understand: humanity's value. Finally, when the discussions began to feel stagnant, Alara stood. The room went quiet as every pair of eyes turned toward her. "I believe it's time we address the real issue," Alara said, her voice calm and measured, but carrying an undeniable authority. "We are discussing an alliance with the Torcan Empire, but we are overlooking a critical fact. This empire is not trustworthy." A collective gasp swept through the room. The Torcans had been allies to many in the past, and their military prowess was undeniable. But they had always left chaos in their wake, using their power to enslave weaker species and destabilize star systems. "You speak boldly, human," said Keleth, his voice tinged with both curiosity and warning. "The Torcans are a strong force. They have long been a part of our council's discussions. Are you suggesting that we turn our backs on them?" "I am suggesting," Alara replied, her gaze sharp, "that we are being too hasty. The Torcans cannot be trusted. They have broken every agreement they've ever made. The Torcan Empire only respects one thing: strength. If we enter into an alliance with them, we are setting ourselves up for disaster." The room grew tense. The other representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Ilara was young, but her reputation as a warrior and tactician made her words carry weight. "There is another way," Ilara continued, her voice unwavering. "Humanity has shown time and time again that we honor our alliances. We protect those who stand with us. We don't abandon our allies for power, and we don't exploit the weak." The Shiv representative, a being of sleek silver skin and glowing blue eyes, leaned forward. "And how would you suggest we deal with the Torkins? Should we simply ignore them and allow them to expand unchecked?" Ilara met his gaze with a steady look. "No. We must be smart. We don't need to fight the Torkins head on, but we need to show them that humanity is not afraid of them. We must make them understand that there are consequences for crossing the line." She paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. The council members were silent now, contemplating her argument. Ilara knew that they didn't trust her yet, but she also knew that the actions of humanity spoke louder than words. The president of the council looked at her with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. "You may be right, Representative Reeves. We will take your words into consideration." Ilara sat back down, a small but confident smile playing at the corner of her lips. She had made her point, but this was only the beginning. The council may have underestimated humanity before, but they were starting to see that Earth's representative was not someone to be ignored. As the discussions continued, Ilara's mind was already turning. She knew that the path ahead would be difficult, but she also knew one thing for sure. Humanity had arrived and it wasn't going anywhere. The council chamber was quiet as the discussion continued. Tension hung in the air after Ilara's bold words, and every representative now regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. The debate over the Torkin alliance had shifted, but not in the way Ilara had expected. Instead of agreeing with her, the council members had become more divided, and the discussion turned into a battle of pride. The Shalran, with their long, telepathic minds, exchanged thoughts silently, seemingly weighing Ilara's words. One of them, a tall being named Nyloth, stood up, his eyes glowing with an ancient light. "Humanity speaks of honor," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "But can they truly maintain such ideals in the face of galactic warfare? The Torkins are powerful. We cannot afford to ignore them." Ilara stood up in turn, her back straight, her expression unwavering. She had expected the pushback, but she wasn't going to back down. "I'm not suggesting we ignore the Torkins," she replied, her voice calm and clear. "I'm suggesting we outsmart them. We need to show them that there are consequences for their actions. We need to play the long game." Some of the council members exchanged uneasy glances. The Shiv representative, a being named Vane, spoke next. "You believe humanity can outsmart the Torkins? How do you propose we do that when we know the Torkins only understand one language, force?" Ilara's lips curled into a faint smile. "Sometimes, the greatest weapon isn't strength, it's strategy. The Torkins thrive on chaos and intimidation, but they make mistakes, big ones. We simply need to expose their weaknesses and strike where it counts." Vane's blue eyes narrowed. "And what would you have us do, Earthling? You cannot simply wish away the power of the Torkins. They will not fall to a clever word or a well-timed maneuver." Ilara shook her head. "It's not just about words or a maneuver. It's about being unpredictable. We must show them that humanity will not back down, and that we are prepared to defend ourselves not through brute force but through our intelligence." The room fell silent as Ilara's words hung in the air. The council members were still unsure, but something in her tone was different from before. There was no fear, no hesitation. She spoke with the confidence of someone who had faced much worse than the Torkans. The rest of the meeting proceeded, but the issue of the Torkin alliance loomed large in everyone's mind. As the session concluded, Ilara returned to her quarters in the council building, her thoughts racing. She had made a mark today, but there was still a long road ahead. The council might not trust her yet, but she knew that things were beginning to change. What she needed now was a real plan to deal with the Torkans and prove to the council that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Back in the council chamber, Keleth, the Shalran president, lingered with a few other representatives. "What do you make of this human?" Keleth asked, his voice thoughtful. "I don't know," Vane replied. "She speaks with authority, but there is something unsettling about her confidence. Humanity is known for its unpredictability." Another representative, a Prahl named Dresh, spoke up. "We should not underestimate her. Earth may be young, but they have a tendency to surprise their enemies. Perhaps there is more to humanity than we realized." Keleth nodded slowly. "I will be watching her closely. But for now, we cannot afford to act on her words alone. We need more information." Meanwhile, Alara sat at her desk examining the reports about the Torcan Empire. She knew the Torcans better than most, having faced them in battle before. Their tactics were brutal and efficient, but they were also predictable. That was their weakness. The Torcans thrived on intimidation, expecting everyone to bow to their strength. But Alara had a different idea. She had faced enemies far more dangerous than the Torcans, and she had won. She would do it again. The next day, Alara's plan began to take shape. She would not confront the Torcans head-on. Instead, she would strike them where it would hurt the most, financially. The Torcan Empire relied heavily on their trade routes to fuel their war machine. If those trade routes were disrupted, the Torcans would be forced to negotiate. Alara began working with a small team of human engineers, strategists, and spies. She tapped into Earth's network of contacts, from diplomats to mercenaries, gathering information and resources that could be used against the Torcans. The plan was bold, but it was simple. Use the Torcans' own greed against them. She spent days coordinating with her team, making sure everything was in place. The more she delved into the Torcan Empire's operations, the clearer it became that they had one fatal flaw. They were arrogant. They thought they could control the galaxy with sheer force, but they had never considered the possibility that someone could outsmart them. By the time Alara returned to the council for the next meeting, she was ready. The council members were discussing new trade agreements when Alara entered the room. Her entrance was met with the usual silence, but this time there was a subtle shift in the air. The council was more curious than before. Keleth addressed her. "First, Representative Reeves, what do you have to report on the Torcan situation?" Alara stood tall and addressed the room. "I have a plan," she said simply. "A way to cripple the Torcans without firing a single shot. It's time we show them that humanity is not just a powerful military force, but a force of intellect, the mom." Room grew quiet as Alara laid out her strategy, explaining how she would disrupt the Torcans' trade routes, cutting off their supplies and forcing them to negotiate. Her plan was bold and unconventional, and while the council members were hesitant at first, they couldn't deny the brilliance of her approach. Keleth leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "You are certain this will work?" Alara met his gaze, without flinching. "Yes, the Torcans will be forced to the negotiating table, and when they do, we will make sure they understand that they cannot bully humanity into submission." The council was silent for a moment. Then murmurs began to ripple through the room. Some were skeptical, but others were intrigued. Humanity had proven once again that it was not to be underestimated. As Alara left the council chamber, she couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. The Torcans might be the galaxy's most feared empire, but humanity had something they didn't: the ability to think outside the box, to outwit their enemies before they even saw it coming. Alara knew that this was just the beginning. The galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous member of the Galactic Council wasn't the Torcans or the Shalran or the Prahl. It was humanity. Alara sat at her desk in the quiet of her quarters, reviewing the data she had gathered. The Torcan Empire had a reputation that echoed across the galaxy: ruthless, efficient, and unyielding. They had destroyed entire civilizations, enslaving weaker species and conquering planets with the speed of a predator. The galaxy feared them. But Alara had seen their weakness, the crack in their iron fist, and she intended to exploit it. As she read over the intelligence reports, a message flashed across her screen, a transmission from the Galactic Council. It was an urgent meeting. The Torcan fleet had been sighted near the Outer Rim, far beyond their borders, and they were moving closer to known neutral zones. A message from the Torcan commander Zargoth had been intercepted. It was clear they were testing the Council's resolve. Alara stood, pushing her chair back. She didn't need to be told twice. The Torcans were making a move. This wasn't just a threat. It was a declaration. They were pushing boundaries, seeing how far they could go before the Council responded. Within the hour, Alara arrived at the Council chamber, her face set in determination. The Council members were already gathered, discussing the situation. Keleth, the Shalran president, looked up as she entered. "Representative Reeves," he said, his tone heavy with concern. "The Torcans have broken several agreements. We need to decide how to respond before the situation escalates further." Alara walked to her seat, her expression calm but resolute. "I have a suggestion," she said, her voice cutting through the growing tension in the room. "We don't wait for the Torcans to make the first move. We act now." The room went silent. The idea of taking action before the Torcans struck first was bold, especially for the more cautious members of the Council. Alara had known this would be controversial, but the longer they waited, the more they risked. "You wish to strike first?" Vane, the Shiv representative, asked, his silver eyes narrowing. "The Torcans are not easily intimidated. An attack from us would bring them to full force. We would be provoking war." "I'm not suggesting an all-out war," Alara replied, her voice calm but firm. "I'm suggesting we make a calculated move, a strike that will cripple their ability to continue their aggression. We need to send a message." The Council members exchanged uneasy glances. It was clear they were divided. Some believed that acting swiftly was necessary. Others feared the consequences of provoking the Torcans. "I agree with Alara," Dresh, the Prahl representative, said, his deep voice booming through the chamber. "The Torcans will only understand force. We must show them that we are willing to fight back, not just talk." Keleth looked between the representatives, his ancient mind carefully weighing the decision. "But we must be cautious. If we provoke them, we risk destabilizing the entire sector. We have seen what the Torcans are capable of." Alara nodded, understanding the fear in Keleth's words. The Torcans had a reputation for brutal retaliation, but she believed humanity had the upper hand. "I don't suggest we attack the Torcan fleet directly," she said, her voice steady. "We know their tactics. What we don't know is their supply chain. If we target their trade routes, their logistics will collapse. The Torcans rely on these routes to supply their war efforts. Without them, they will be forced to negotiate." There was a long pause. It was a risk, but it was a calculated one. Alara could see the doubt in the eyes of the Council members, but she also saw a glimmer of understanding. The Torcans weren't invincible. They were powerful, but they were not infallible. And humanity had something they didn't: ingenuity. Vane, who had been skeptical at first, leaned forward. "You believe disrupting their supply lines will force them to the table?" he asked, his voice tinged with intrigue. "I do," Alara said. "The Torcans are not accustomed to being weakened. They've always relied on their strength and their ability to intimidate. This will catch them off guard." The Council deliberated for hours. Ilara's plan was discussed, debated, and scrutinized, but in the end, the majority agreed. The Torcans had pushed too far, and it was time to show them that the Council and humanity would not be bullied. The following days were a blur for Alara. She worked tirelessly with her team, coordinating the disruption of the Torcan trade routes. Ships were prepared, crews were trained, and covert operations were set in motion. The Torcans had no idea what was coming. They thought they were untouchable, but Alara knew better. As the operation began, Ilara's confidence grew. They targeted key supply routes, cutting off the flow of resources to the Torcan fleets. Within hours, the Torcans began to feel the impact. Their war machine, once unstoppable, started to slow down. Ships were stranded in space without fuel. Weapon systems ran low on ammunition. The Torcan Empire, known for its vast power, was now vulnerable. Alara watched the news reports as the Torcan fleet struggled to respond. It was only a matter of time before they realized they had been outmaneuvered. The Torkans were a brutal species, but they were also prideful. The thought of being outsmarted by a human and by extension by humanity would be intolerable for them. As the days passed, the Torkans' frustration grew. Zargoth, the Torkan commander, issued a message to the council. His words were laced with fury. "This is your warning," the message began, his voice cold and threatening. "The Torkan Empire will not be humiliated. We will retaliate for this insolence, and you will regret the day you crossed us." Alara listened to the transmission with a steady gaze. She knew the Torkans would retaliate, but they had no idea how deep the disruption went. Humanity had taken the first step, but this was only the beginning. The Torkans would have no choice but to come to the negotiating table or face the full consequences of their miscalculation. Keleth, the Shalran president, looked at Alara as the council reconvened. "You have done what we could not, Representative Reeves," he said, his tone grudgingly respectful. "You have shown the galaxy that humanity is not to be underestimated." Alara nodded, but her mind was already on the next step. The Torkans were far from finished, but humanity had proven its worth. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, but humanity had shown that it was ready to take its place among the stars. The calm after the storm didn't last long. As the Torkans slowly regrouped after the disruption to their trade routes, a new threat began to reveal itself, one that had nothing to do with the Torkan Empire. A shadowy conspiracy within the Galactic Council itself was starting to take shape, and Alara was at the center of it. It had started with whispers. Small rumors passed between council members, most of them about Alara's rising influence. Her bold move against the Torkans had been successful, but it had also made her a target. Some of the more powerful species in the council didn't like the idea of a human being, the one to bring the Torkans to their knees. To them, it was a threat to their own authority. The old order was being shaken, and they didn't want to lose their grip on power. Alara first noticed something was wrong during a routine meeting. She had been sitting at the long table with the other representatives discussing trade regulations and security agreements when she saw Keleth exchange a quick look with Vane, the Shiv representative. There was something unsettling about the way they glanced at each other, a silent communication she couldn't quite understand. Later, when the meeting was over, Alara had received a private message from an anonymous source. The message was simple. "Trust no one. There are those who seek to control the council from within. Be careful." It wasn't much, but it was enough to set off alarms in Alara's mind. She'd learned over the years that when things didn't feel right, it usually meant something was wrong. She began digging into the council's records, searching for anything that might explain the sudden shift in the political landscape. It didn't take long for her to find something disturbing. There was a hidden faction, a group of council members, and representatives from various species, working together in secret. They were planning to use the council's influence to manipulate galactic politics for their own benefit. The group was led by some of the most respected members of the council, including high-ranking officials from the Shalran, the Shiv, and even the Praal. Alara's heart sank as she pieced the puzzle together. The conspiracy was far more dangerous than she had initially thought. They were planning to create a false war, a conflict that would allow them to take control of more resources and weaken the council's unity. The Torkan Empire, for all its power and cruelty, was being used as a distraction. Behind the scenes, the conspirators were orchestrating events to create division, chaos, and instability among the council's members. If their plan succeeded, they would control the fate of the galaxy and no one would be able to stop them. Alara knew she had to act quickly. She couldn't reveal what she had learned just yet. If she did, the conspirators would know she was onto them. Instead, she gathered a small, trusted group of allies from Earth and a few other council members she believed still held true to the original values of the council. Together, they began to investigate the conspiracy further, gathering evidence, while staying under the radar. The more they uncovered, the worse it became. The conspirators had been slowly manipulating the council's decisions, making deals with the Torkans behind closed doors, and even orchestrating the disruption of the trade routes that Alara had uncovered earlier. It was all part of a much larger plan to create chaos, weaken the Council's power, and eventually take control for themselves. Alara felt the weight of the situation on her shoulders. She had expected challenges, but nothing like this. She had thought the Torkans were the greatest threat to peace in the galaxy, but this secret cabal within the Council was a far more dangerous force. If they succeeded, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift forever, and humanity would be swept up in the turmoil. She knew she had to confront the conspiracy head-on. The Council could not be allowed to fall under the control of those who cared only for their own agendas. But exposing the conspiracy would require more than just proof. It would require strategy, timing, and allies willing to stand with her. The danger was too great to act rashly, so Alara took her time, carefully preparing for the moment when she would reveal the truth. A few days later, during a particularly tense council session, Alara made her move. The topic of the Torkan Empire was once again on the agenda, but this time something was different. Alara had gathered enough evidence to confront the conspiracy head-on, and she wasn't going to wait any longer. "I believe we are missing something in our discussions," she said, her voice steady but carrying an unmistakable edge. "We're focused on the Torkans, but there's a much greater threat to the peace of the galaxy, one that's coming from within our very own ranks." The council members turned their attention to her, their expressions ranging from confusion to skepticism. Caleth, the Shalran president, narrowed his eyes. "What are you implying, Representative Reeves?" Alara stood, her posture firm. "There is a faction within the council, a group of influential members who have been conspiring to destabilize the council and take control of galactic politics. They've been manipulating events from behind the scenes, including the disruption of the Torkan trade routes and the conflict we've seen with them. They are playing us all like pawns." A murmur spread through the room. Some of the council members looked shocked, while others were visibly angry. Vane, the Shiv representative, stood and gestured toward Alara. "Do you have proof of this accusation?" he demanded. "Or are you simply making baseless claims?" Alara remained calm. She stepped forward and activated a holographic display showing the encrypted communications she had intercepted. The council watched in silence as images and documents appeared, revealing the secret meetings, the agreements with the Torkans, and the plan to create chaos. "This is the proof," Alara said, her voice cold. "These are the ones who have been pulling the strings. These are the individuals who have been orchestrating this entire situation for their own gain." For a long moment, the room was silent. The conspirators' faces were pale, their masks slipping as the truth began to sink in. Alara had done it. She had exposed them. The conspiracy was no longer hidden in the shadows. Keleth, the Shalran president, looked around the room, his face a mask of disbelief. "We will deal with this immediately. These individuals will be removed from the council, and their actions will be investigated." As the conspirators were taken into custody, Alara felt a sense of relief wash over her. The council had been saved, but there was still much work to be done. The galaxy was no longer facing just one threat. It was facing many, and Alara knew that the path to peace was far from over. Alara sat alone in her quarters, staring at the stars outside her window. The galaxy looked calm from here, beautiful, silent, endless. But she knew the peace was only on the surface. Inside the council, cracks had already formed. The conspirators were arrested, their secret plans exposed. Still, the damage they caused couldn't be undone so easily. Since the last council meeting, everything had changed. Some members now supported Alara more than ever, respecting her courage and honesty. Others were afraid of her, afraid that one human had uncovered a plan they couldn't see, and worse, had stopped it without their help. She had won the battle, but trust in the council was breaking. The very organization built to protect the galaxy now seemed fragile. It needed rebuilding. Alara knew that task would not be easy. As she drank her tea, a knock echoed on her door. "Come in," she said, without looking up. The door opened, and a young Earth diplomat named Jonah entered. He had been working closely with her since the Torkan operation began. He was smart, loyal, and believed in her mission. "Ilara," he said, "you need to see this." He handed her a datapad. On the screen was a report from the outer colonies. Several Torcan warships had been spotted again, this time gathering near a peaceful human settlement. The Torcans were not retreating after all. They were preparing for something bigger. Ilara frowned. "I thought the trade disruption would slow them down, but they're adapting." Jonah nodded. "We think the Torcans realized we outmaneuvered them. Now they want revenge." Ilara stood up and paced the room. "They're not just angry. They're preparing for war." Jonah hesitated. "We've received messages from 2 council species, the Drexel and the Varn. They say they won't get involved if a war begins. They want to stay neutral." Ilara looked at him, her jaw tight. "Of course they do. They're afraid. That's exactly what the Torcans want." She realized something important in that moment. Even with the conspiracy stopped, the galaxy was still divided. Everyone was looking out for themselves. The council had become weak. No one wanted to take responsibility unless it benefited them directly. Ilara turned back to Jonah. "Call a council meeting today." "Today?" he asked, surprised. "But some of the members may not attend. Then we'll speak to the ones who will," she said. "It's time someone told the truth." A few hours later, the council chamber filled with tension once again. Ilara stood at the center, looking at the tired, worried faces of the remaining members. Some chairs were empty, those who had chosen silence instead of action. She raised her voice so everyone could hear her clearly. This council was formed to protect peace, but peace does not survive on its own. It must be defended, even when it's difficult. Right now, we face a growing danger. The Torcans are preparing for war, and many of you want to stay out of it. A few members shifted uncomfortably. Ilara continued. "You think if you stay silent, they won't come for you, but they will. The Torcans don't care about borders or alliances. They only care about power. If we allow them to grow stronger, they will crush all of us, one by one." Keleth, the Shalran leader, spoke up. "You ask us to fight again, Ilara. After everything we've been through after the conspiracy, you want us to go to war?" Ilara shook her head. "No, I want us to stand together. We don't have to start a war. We have to show unity, strength. We have to remind the Torcans that we are not afraid." Vane, the Shiv representative, leaned forward. "And if they call our bluff? What then?" "Then we do what humanity has always done," Ilara said, eyes burning with passion. "We fight not because we love war, but because we love peace more." There was silence in the chamber. Some members nodded slowly. Others still looked unsure. But Ilara could feel something shifting. The truth had touched them. Later that evening, Ilara met Jonah outside the council building. The sun of the council's host planet was setting, casting long shadows across the marble floor. "You spoke well today," Jonah said. "They're thinking about what you said." "They need to act," Ilara replied. "Thinking won't save the galaxy." Jonah looked down. "Some are saying you're dangerous now, too bold, too unpredictable." Ilara gave a small smile. "Good. Let them think that. Sometimes being feared is the only way to get others to move." He nodded, but she could see the worry in his eyes. "And if the Torcans attack first? Then we'll be ready," she said. "And they'll find that humanity doesn't run. We stand, we fight smart, and we survive." A few days passed. The council slowly started coming back together. Not everyone agreed, but enough of them supported Ilara's plan. Together, they created a unified defense plan, sharing ships, intelligence, and technology to prepare for a possible Torcan attack. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Then one morning, a priority signal came in from the outer colonies. A small human settlement on the edge of space had gone silent. No communication, no warning. Ilara's heart dropped. "They've started," she whispered. The war hadn't officially begun yet, but everyone knew. It was only a matter of time. The Torcans had made their move, and now it was the council's turn. And in the middle of it all stood Ilara Reeves, the woman who had exposed a conspiracy, stopped a hidden war, and now had to lead a galaxy into battle. She didn't ask for this. She didn't want fame or power, but when the galaxy needed someone brave enough to speak the truth and stand tall, it wasn't the oldest, richest, or strongest who answered. It was a human, the most dangerous member of the Galactic Council, and now her real fight was about to begin. The quiet of the early morning was shattered by the blare of alarms throughout the council building. Ilara's heart raced as she bolted upright in her quarters. The Torcan fleet had made its move, and they were headed straight for the outer colonies. The very colonies humanity had worked so hard to protect. The time for talks for diplomacy was over. Ilara knew this day would come. The Torcans had been patient, waiting for the right moment to strike, but they had underestimated one thing: humanity's resolve. She had promised to defend peace, to stand for her people and the galaxy no matter the cost. And now, the battle was upon them. She quickly dressed in her uniform and rushed to the command center. Jonah, along with a team of Earth's best officers, was already there, coordinating with other council representatives. "Ilara, we've got confirmation," Jonah said, his voice tight with urgency. "The Torcans have jumped into the system, and they're moving fast. We don't have much time." She nodded, taking a deep breath. "How long before they reach the colonies?" "Less than 5 hours," Jonah replied. "We've already sent out our fleet, but we'll need reinforcements from the council if we're going to stop them in time." Ilara's mind raced as she scanned the holographic display of the galaxy. The Torcan fleet was massive, more than 36 ships, heavily armed and ready for war. They were moving toward the peaceful human colonies in the Outer Rim, where the majority of Earth's civilians lived. Ilara couldn't let that happen. She knew the Torcans wouldn't hesitate to wipe them out in a single brutal strike. She looked at the council representatives who had joined her in the command center. "We can't afford to wait for reinforcements," she said. "We have to hit them now, before they can land on the colonies." Keleth, the Shalran president, stepped forward. His face was calm, but his eyes held an edge of concern. "You want us to attack without full council support?" he asked. "Yes," Ilara replied firmly. "We can't waste time debating. If we wait, the colonies will fall, and we'll lose the chance to stop them." Vane, the Shiv representative, glanced at the holographic map and then back at Ilara. "What do you propose?" "We launch a surprise strike," Ilara said, her tone sharp. "We know the Torcans' movements. Their ships are coordinated, but they rely heavily on their flagship for command. If we can take that flagship down, we cripple their ability to fight back." There was a murmur of agreement, but not all the representatives were convinced. Dresh, the Prowl, looked uneasy. "You're asking us to risk everything on one strike. If we fail, we won't fail," Ilara cut him off. "We've been planning for this moment. Humanity knows how to fight, and we've got the advantage of surprise." Jonah stepped forward with a datapad in hand. "Ilara's right. We've already mapped out the Torcan fleet's weakness. Their flagship, the Tyrant, has a vulnerable spot in its outer shield. We can slip through that gap and hit their command center directly." Ilara's gaze hardened. "If we take down the Tyrant, the rest of their fleet will fall apart. They won't have the coordination they need to keep fighting. We'll show them that humanity isn't afraid to do what it takes." The council members exchanged looks, their uncertainty slowly turning into a determined resolve. They had witnessed what humanity was capable of, and they had seen the power of Ilara's leadership. It was time to take action. "We're with you," Keleth said, his voice steady. "We'll launch the strike." The fleet assembled quickly. The coalition of human ships, now reinforced by ships from the Shalran and Shiv, took position in the space surrounding the Torcan fleet. Ilara stood at the head of the human fleet, her mind sharp, focused on the mission ahead. This was her moment. Everything she had worked for, everything she had fought for, had led to this point. There would be no turning back. As the countdown began, Ilara addressed her fleet over the comms, her voice calm but filled with an unwavering determination. "We are humanity's hope. We are the ones who stand for peace. Today, we fight not For war, but for survival. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. We will make them understand that we are not weak, and we are not afraid. The countdown hit 0. The fleet engaged, rocketing toward the Torcan fleet with all the power they could muster. The first wave of human ships opened fire, drawing the Torcans' attention, while Alara led a small squadron toward the tyrant. Their mission was clear: take down the flagship and the rest of the Torcans would be left in chaos. Through the fire and explosions of the battle, Alara's ship raced toward the Torcan flagship. The enemy fired relentlessly, but humanity's ships were nimble, dodging the blasts and returning fire. Alara's heart pounded in her chest as the distance closed. Every second mattered. The fate of the colonies rested on her shoulders. Ready to make the strike, her weapons officer called out. Alara nodded. Do it. A well-aimed shot pierced the shield of the tyrant, creating a massive explosion. The flagship staggered, its engines faltering. Alara's fleet pressed on, striking with precision, each shot landing exactly where it needed to. Direct hit to their command center, Jonah called out. They're losing control. Alara watched as the tyrant began to lose its power. The other Torcan ships, once so coordinated, now seemed disorganized, their attacks faltering. The Torcans were scrambling, and Alara knew this was their moment. With a final powerful volley, the flagship exploded in a bright burst of light, sending shockwaves through the remaining Torcan fleet. Alara's fleet moved in for the kill, finishing off the disoriented enemy ships. The Torcans were defeated. Hours later, Alara stood in the council chamber, her face weary but triumphant. The battle was over. The colonies had been saved. The Torcans, for now, were pushed back. But the cost of victory was high. Many lives had been lost, both on the battlefield and in the colonies. There was still much work to be done to rebuild. We did it, Jonah said quietly, standing beside her. Alara nodded, but her eyes remained distant. Yes, but this is just the beginning. The galaxy has learned something today. Humanity will not back down. We fight for peace, for the future of all who call this galaxy home. Keleth, the Shalaran leader, approached her, his expression one of deep respect. You have proven us wrong, Representative Reeves. We underestimated you and humanity. Today you led us all to victory. Alara nodded, but she knew the true challenge lay ahead. The Torcans were not the only threat in the galaxy. There would always be new dangers, new battles to face. But humanity had proven something essential. It was no longer a fledgling species on the sidelines. It was a force to be reckoned with. The galaxy's most dangerous member had earned her place among the stars, and she would protect it for as long as it took. This concludes the Galactic Council's most dangerous member. Let me know if you'd like to explore anything else or need adjustments.